So, hi everyone, welcome to this inaugural broadcast of the CTO podcast. This is a podcast all about being a CTO, and it's designed to help share information with people who maybe want to become a CTO or are unsure about what a CTO actually does. So, this will be hopefully a kind of every couple of weeks a month a podcast on a new topic. But this week, for the first podcast, we're joined by Andy Brownlie and Andrew McCaughan. I got it right. Hey, there you go. I've been practicing that. To join us to talk about a CTO, because the first thing to really kind of cover, I think, on a CTO podcast is probably what is a CTO, right? What does it actually mean? And I know we've spoken briefly already, but it does mean lots of different things to different people. And I've been a CTO a few times now, and still am. And I have people come up to me and asking me, what is it? How do I become one? How did you get there? So we're going to cover all those topics tonight. We'll start off with Andy. Andy, do you want to give us a bit of background on yourself and tell us just a bit about yourself, man?
Sure. My name's Andy Brownlie. I'm personally wise, I'm 48 now. I'm at the age of stop counting and actually start forgetting what age you are. So I'm based in Northern Ireland, beside you guys. I've been here for 7 going on 8 years now, and I'm CTO of CADshare, which is also based here in Northern Ireland as well. So our CEO, Chris Atchison, it's his brainchild, it's his idea. He comes from that kind of background, that kind of manufacturing and engineering background, and identified that kind of problem, a gap in the market there. Bizarrely enough, before CADshare come along, there's 1 or 2 other competitors in the market, but the majority of people solve this problem through, believe it or not, PDF drawings. I mean, they're akin to like IKEA kind of assembly manual type thing. So you can imagine that for something as complex as a bit of machinery or really complex kit, and having to look through, pages and pages of manual. So you just give up and buy a new one, wouldn't you? So this is my second go as well, believe it or not, as well. So
yeah, because you were boards. Was it boards 1, 2, 3 before?
Yeah, well, it wasn't known as boards 1, 2, 3 when I was there. Yeah, with Anne Orr. Yeah, so Anne is CEO of boards 1, 2, 3 now. We kicked that off from a really early idea of actually, just basically an idea. We went through the Ignite program, the Propel pre-accelerator, which, funnily enough, Chris did a couple of years before that, as well with CADshare. So yeah, Anne and I did that with our idea. The product was called Aluna at the time, and we worked on that heavily for a good two years.
Right.
The reality of it was that I burnt out after 2 years of doing that, and I was, because we weren't making money at the time, I was doing that while contracting at the time and trying to juggle both of those things. And I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Again, I wouldn't do it again. It took me I would say a year, 18 months to recover from that. And so I had really to focus and turn my attention to, try to get contract work and stuff like that, and not have to juggle both of those things. So and kept it on and kind of revamped it and rebooted it all, and it's now boards 1, 2, 3, and she's still going with it, and it's really good.
Good. Thanks for that. Nice. Andrew, what about yourself? Tell us a bit about your background and what you're doing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So as Gareth did a great job of saying my name. Yes, I'm Andrew McCaughan. Nice one. It's I get lots of different versions of my surname, and that's totally fine. I'm used to it. But Gareth knocked it right out of the park first time, so I have to give him kudos for that. I've been working in the industry for give or take 20 years now. Whether that was like during school, during university, or after graduating from Queen's, I've worked in the industry. Started off building access databases for care homes back in early 2000. Over the years, I've worked in quite a few different places. And then after graduation, I've worked in quite a lot of Northern Irish companies, whether it was starting back in the day in Lagan Technologies, maybe that is a name that some people are familiar with, through to a few small firms in Belfast. And then, as with most people in Northern Ireland, they get a bit of experience working for an FDI. Worked with Nant Health. Well, it was actually Navinet back in the day, and then went into software architecture. So started off very much software development, 9-to-5 developer. Well, a 9-to-5 developer during the week, and then went into the world of software architecture because I like to say it depends a lot, and I also like whiteboards and markers and drawing boxes and arrows. So probably for the past 8 or so years, I've been on that journey through the software architecture, and then I worked with Philips. I worked with it was actually PathXL that was acquired by Philips. Worked as an architect, and actually got my first taste of leadership, sort of being a line manager for people, which was a very interesting experience, especially during my time in Philips. And it felt just like just where my career was going. It just felt like a natural progression that I was interested in the CTO role. And after working for quite a long time for quite large companies, I was interested in building something from scratch. So an opportunity came up back in early 2020 to join a startup called Buffalo Grid. So that was my first foray into the world of being a CTO. And I'll actually caveat that by saying a startup CTO, okay? Because I think where we're going to talk about later, I think there's lots of that little phrase, it depends, I think is very important whenever we talk about being a CTO. So I joined Buffalo Grid as CTO, starting from pretty much they had originally built a product that was very much, so it was a hardware software company, and it was building a device that allowed people in developing countries with maybe not a reliable source of power to have a device that allowed them to, say, charge a mobile device or some sort of electronic device. The device had a big battery in it. You could connect it to a solar panel, and you could charge up to 28 or so devices in the early prototypes. The company then pivoted. They originally had a team in London. That team was disbanded, and Daniel got another round of funding, and he he established like a team in Belfast. So working first foray into being a CTO, it was, I think it was safe to say I was well out of my depth, especially starting with working in hardware. Hadn't done that before. Setting up a team from scratch, understanding the problem, pivoting the original idea from this one device that does charging to not just doing charging, but also offering streaming and digital services to in this device. So the idea is that this device that we were building would be a device that allowed people to access or to basically stream content to their mobile device without the use of the internet. So we the idea was that we piggybacked off the cellular network, and then we kind of democratized or shared the load across the different viewers by storing content on the device. I kind of call it like a little charger zone, but also like if you've ever looked into Netflix Open Connect, this kind of like appliance that sits in a data center that has the content closer to your home. It was kind of that idea, and our main target was these like rural communities, peri-urban areas of say sub-Saharan Africa, India, Bangladesh, Mexico, places like that. We started working on the new product in March 2020, the start of the pandemic. probably the single worst time to work in a hardware startup, because during that time, everybody was buying Pelotons and iPads and everything else, and also then with every factory in China and Taiwan shutting, every component that we were looking for started to go through the roof in terms of cost and also availability. We had lead times of like 200 weeks in some components. So we were doing risk buys, and I mean, I think our target was something like $500 for the first devices, and I think it ended up in $800 or $900. It was crazy. But at the same time, then we were building the mobile app, we were building services, and we were building stuff in Azure to allow content distribution to the devices remotely, and then also getting curating data about how people are using the service and what type of content. So I actually did that up until last December. I was also involved in rolling out a trial with the International Trade Center, trade and things like that, ethical trade. So we rolled out the trial with them in Zambia, and had the fortune to go out to Zambia and actually deploy some of those devices there in that trial. And that trial is actually still going on today. And like a lot of startups last year, if their runway we weren't able to extend the runway much further. So the team disbanded. The company kept going. The CTO, Daniel, he was able to keep pushing trials and things like that. And I believe he's now a little bit further on in some trials. So it'll be really interesting to see just how Buffalo Grid continues. Cool. So then I had a great conversation with the MD of one of the business units in Civica, and she told me of some challenging situation that her team had been facing over the past year, and it just sounded like a fantastic opportunity. There were lots of problems needing solved, and it just felt like a really nice opportunity after 3 years of really grinding hard, trying to build something from scratch, dealing with the perils of startup world, coming into a fairly established organization. Over the past year, I've really been working on harmonizing the team, making things better, focusing on quality, and also quicker releases. And it's been really good fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's been great because I've been able to take a lot of things I learned being a CTO in a fast-paced startup and applying those in the current job. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. Really interesting. Both of you, really interesting stories. My background, I think most people probably know, I'm experienced CTO now, been a software engineer for 25 years. Been a consultant, traveled the world, told people how to build things correctly, and then tried to do it myself. This is my third round now as a CTO, most famous one probably being Salazar, which is a 3PL that recently went into administration, sadly. But I think one of the kind of key things I got there, especially from you guys, is there's an inherent risk with being a CTO, and you grind and you can burn out, because I know I did as well, really badly at one point, because you're just committing yourself to it so much. But, I guess that brings us right to the question of, what is a CTO, right? What is it to you? What does it mean? I mean, you mentioned, Andrew, that, you're talking about a startup CTO, but what does it mean to you guys? Andy, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I mean, I think Andrew kind of touched on it earlier on there. I think it depends on the organisation that you're performing that role in, right? As to what the roles and responsibilities are. Is it? And again, Andrew touched on it with his experience, and I'm similar. Is it product? Is your company working on a product, or is it working on services? Mm-hmm. Because depending on what your organisation does, that will vary quite a bit in terms of what that then means as your role as CTO. The size of the organization can make it dramatically different as well. We all touched on the fact that it's all been startup for us. The challenges of growing an organization or dealing with hundreds or thousands of engineers and or developers, it is a different challenge than 2 or 3 people and scrambling around trying to get something working, right? And then I guess it will also depend, again, size of the organization dependent, but what other roles and responsibilities the rest of the executive team have within your organization as well, because the boundaries will vary ever so slightly depending on that organization as well.
Yeah.
But for me, the kind of commonality, regardless of size, regardless of the type of organization that you're in, the kind of commonality there for a CTO would be things like having at least oversight on the technology part of it, right, of the offering, whether it's a product or a service. And in a lot of cases, it's more than oversight, right? It's still cutting code, but what sets you apart from, I guess, a senior engineer or whatever, would be that you have to balance that with the demands of the product or the service, right? And being kind of pragmatic around that, because we can all sit there and architect to the cows come home. We can all sit there and write the best, gold plate the code that we're working on, right? But if you don't have customers to sell it to, or you lose those customers because you're not delivering features, then it's absolutely pointless. So it's getting that balance, and that balance for me is the trickiest thing about the job, because coming from a technology background, you want to do the best, engineering job that you can. But sometimes you just have to be pragmatic about it and just say, well, it's not perfect, but it works, and let's get it out there, get it in front of customers, and then we can worry about the fact that it's not perfect later. Right? Yeah. So you can get CTOs that maybe didn't come from a development background, but can still advise on those kind of role, in that kind of role. I think maybe slightly easier for those people because they don't know how the code works, and therefore they don't get involved in it to a certain degree.
Daywalkers, that's what they're called.
What's that?
Daywalkers. CTOs with no technology background.
Yeah. But so that's the thing for me is that balance, right? And Chris and I don't mind saying this, is that this is what Chris and I not argue about, but it's what we rub up against each other about all the time. But I think that's a healthy thing,
That's good. Yeah, definitely.
So that's
Andrew,
me. Yeah.
What about yourself?
I think what Andy says is I would resonate with me a lot. The overarching responsibility of a CTO, whether it's in a startup, whether it's in a big organization, is you are the advocate for the technology in your organization. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe a very broad thing to say. But what I mean by that is that you are the at board level or at seniority level, you are the person that the buck stops with you, where in terms of where the technology is. Going further down, Andy's right. I mean, that was one thing I certainly found really challenging, especially in the Buffalo Grid days. Was it's just like it's that balance of good code, but at the end of the day, the only code that is actually valuable is actually code that's in production and is actually making money. Dare I say it, we're going to have to accept technical debt. We're going to have to accept maybe cutting corners. We don't like to admit it, but sometimes we have to do it to get a feature ready out to market so that it can either generate that first invoice that we want or to get that next round of investment. I think there's hard decisions that you will have to take as a CTO. If sometimes the right, the people just are not, you bring somebody on and it just isn't going to work out. And maybe there's just, maybe it's a different mindset. Maybe it's just that person's not meeting those expectations, or they're not aligning with your vision or the strategy that you have, then you have to make tough decisions pretty much straight away, because you have to think, well, having this problem go on for 3 months, well, that's 3 months of runway that I'm not going to get back. So you have to make some tough decisions. And I think in hindsight, there's probably some decisions like I did renege on in Buffalo Grid that I certainly learned from. But for me, the most important thing is, regardless, is that being that advocate for technology, you're also the public face of your technology team as well. I don't know about you, Andy, if you were talking to investors, or Gareth yourself, whenever you were in Sellers, or speaking to investors, you were that person who's involved in working and having to answer all those due diligence questions, things that you've got family funds and things here are saying, like, what are you building, and how can I trust that you're going to be a good guardian or a good keeper of this money? How are you going to use this wisely? So it's amazing how I actually think that's probably more of the challenge as a CTO than actually the technology side. I think the technology in some ways actually looks after itself, especially if you have if you have the means to have a good development team around you. Sometimes that can look after itself.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. I think I agree with so much that you guys have both said. I mean, just reiterating kind of some touch points there. Governance, ownership, hugely important as a CTO. You're kind of on your own at the top, and you can have great co-founders or great C-suite members with you, but you have to kind of stand on your own 2 feet and be you, represent the kind of technology within the business, and often the business as a whole. And it's very, very daunting if you're doing it for the first time, definitely. I guess, there's some other things you guys mentioned. You mentioned there about being on the boards or being exposed to the board. I totally agree. I think that's hugely essential because you do need to see what is being asked of the business and the C-suite, not just yourself. You have to see that big picture of what's going on across the business. And it's a very pragmatic role. Being a CTO, you have to, I always say that, as a software developer in the past, if you were asked what your job was, it was to create code. As a CTO, my job was is to release product and get it out there and get it used. And it isn't going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Nothing is, in my experience. How unperfect it is kind of up for debate. And, technical debt is always manageable, but you're never going to have the perfect product. And I think that's where, in my experience, some technology people lose focus. They go into a senior role, like a CTO role, and they fail because they want to create the perfect product. They've seen other people not make the perfect product, and they go, oh, I want to be the boss because I want to make the perfect product. And that's just the road to disaster, in my experience. So that's kind of my experience as well. But yeah, I mean, at Sellers, I would be working with the boards and the investors every month, and some of them would be funds, some of them would be angels, some of them would be big funds from London. I mean, I remember the four of us going to pitch in the Shard in a massive boardroom, and that was the outcome of that was you have to build this and deliver it and have a customer on it in 3 months. And it was like, what? Okay, well, we can do that. We can do that, and we will make that happen. And then you have the due diligence of people coming in and kind of going through your code in fine detail and saying, well, you could have done this, you could have done that. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And that's challenging as well because, you have to be thick-skinned because it's your baby at the end of the day, and you have to stand there and somebody's going to criticize you. And you're going to be criticized a lot. You'll be criticized by the people above you. You'll be criticized by the people below you, As a manager, you're not going to be liked by everyone. But as a CTO, it's even harder to be liked by everyone or anyone sometimes because you're making those really tough decisions that affect people's jobs and their business and their investment all at once. and it's hard to balance that. I guess what we're saying here is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what we're saying is a CTO is someone who has the governance, the ownership, and the responsibility to produce technology for a company. And with that comes risk, comes perils, and kind of the danger of burnout and all of these kind of things. But, getting there is very much a kind of labor of love. It's very much a kind of a vocationary thing rather than kind of just a job. You've got to kind of be that person. And, in the words of Gene Belcher from Bob's Burgers, this is me now. So what do you think, guys, to summarise, what's next for you? Is this you? Is this you now? Are you now a CTO and this is where you want to be, or is there something else?
I'd love to say yes and then not have to worry about that ever again, but I don't know. I guess for me, I'm very happy where I am now. I'm quite lucky. I don't really want to change that. I'm very kind of settled and I consider myself quite fortunate with that.
What about you, Andrew? Are you content in the big corporation now, or do you ever see yourself going back to startup land? Or
I mean, if things had worked out in Buffalo Grid, I think I would still be there. I think there's no two ways about that. I would still be there. But joining Civica I've actually really, really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to see where we go with things in 2024. So I'll stay. I'm gonna enjoy big corporate life for a little while, and we'll see how it goes.
I think that's to wrap us up on this, I think that's one of the key things that, especially people who see CTO as a goal in their career, or, a title that they want to have, it's more of a mindset. It's more of an intention to do good things with software, with products, rather than just the job title itself. If you're just after, as you said, Andy, the job title, then, you're going to get really disappointed. That's going to wear thin really quickly. But if you've got that intentional mindset, if you've got that kind of love for producing good quality software, then, CTO is a great fit.
Yeah.
All right, lads. Thanks very much. Greatly appreciate your time.
It's been good.
Yeah.